So with no further ado, I'd like to present our first speaker, Mr. Richard Jolly, who actually oversees the e-commerce component of ACI. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hey, hello and good morning. My name is Richard Jolly. I'm responsible at ACI Worldwide for two principal products, our e-com gateway and ACI Redshield, which is our risk management platform. I just had to sort of reconfirm who and what ACI are, because during some engagement I had yesterday, there was some sort of debate, who are and what is ACI? So fundamentally, we're a NASDAQ-listed company. We are served by over 30 global offices, and we provide a complete and broad suite of payment technologies, offline, online, APM, ATM, real-time. And just take this stat, that through our rails, we process $14 trillion worth of payments and securities every single day. So that should give you some context of who ACI are. But in the context of merchant payments, our role at ACI is to facilitate the growth of global commerce. And as a technology company, because we're not an acquirer, we're not a bank, we're not a PSP, we're not a payment method, my presentation really is about providing an alternative interpretation of how merchants can adopt a different approach to the challenges of global payment acceptance through the lens of the merchant. Okay. But I think it's always useful just to remind ourselves about the size of the prize that is presented in front of us. And we've heard from multiple presentations yesterday, certainly today, and almost certainly tomorrow, some of these key statistics. Now, and they come from an assortment of sources, but the pertinent call-outs that I wanted to raise today are the following. Now, 50% of online shoppers will make a cross-border purchase or have done in the last 6 months. Now, that's over half of your addressable market. And 55% will be through an alternative payment method, and that trend is only increasing. And the final one, really, and this is just to show you that as global commerce increases, that combination of M and e-com, that does opportunities for more fraud, or more sophisticated fraud. And basically, the premise from this single slide is that inappropriate strategies or poorly executed strategies or poor vendor selection will leave a huge amounts of value and money on the table, forgetting any notion of net promoter score for your merchant. And this survey is a representation of a global retailer that wanted to better understand how they could embark on a program of digital transformation and to challenge the status quo. Now, what was the demands of the digitally conscious consumer, how to connect with these digital natives who demand frictionless payments. So, I mean, let's be clear, we're living in a world of Amazon and Google and Amazon Prime where we're expecting something here and now. And what I really liked about this approach, that it really took a structured strategy by putting the customer's expectations first. Of course, they didn't offer and present language like, do you understand or do you want an omni-channel experience? Of course not. But they wanted to engage and connect with the digital consumer. And they went through this broad question and answer survey and looking at security, immediates, and convenience. And immediate convenience was things like real-time chat. How can I get a refund? Can I check and click and go into store and undertake refunds? And they didn't want redirects. And you might even remember the days when you had to engage on a mobile and you had to do this. No, they're just bad experience, quick page load speeds. And they want relevancy. Relevancy to me, the consumer, in terms of present me with the most recognized and trusted brand that I want to pay with. And that, again, that instant customer reaction in terms of online chat. So this was a real structured approach to how they can embark on a program of digital transformation. And one of the very earliest and quickest wins is to ensure, and this is really the holy grail for all merchants, conversion optimization. Now, looking at where they can adopt local acquiring rather than work with several acquirers, where they have the local knowledge and data to optimize and make better decision-making outcomes, to optimize conversion. And this is one of the very easiest and most effective customer engagement strategies that this particular retailer was able to embark upon. And again, one of the key stats, 80% of consumers will feel safer if their logo that they trust and they most frequently pay with is presented. So basically it's saying that there is no one size fits all. And really, what it comes down to is for merchants to give themselves the very greatest probability of success when we're in effectively a consumer land grab, they must offer the local payment types that are recognized, trusted, and utilized by the end consumer. And again, that extends to local acquiring. And that picture and that landscape continues. Now, as Europe is characterized by great diversity, but also great similarity, in that there is also a very, very remarkable difference in payment preference. If we look at this slide, the UK, there's approximately 45% consumer preference for debit, but in Italy, it's 12%. We switched to Ireland, 87% credit versus Sweden, which is in 12%. So this slide talks to the point that you've got to offer the most recognized and local payment method. If you're not, you're basically setting yourself up for suboptimal performance or, in some cases, abject failure. So therefore, the takeaway here is that all stakeholders need to be very cognizant that recognizing these local behaviors and correspondingly the preferred payment is only the way that you're going to optimize conversion acceptance. And really one final point on this, when we look at Germany and UK, it's very similar in terms of GDP, very similar in terms of e-com maturity, very similar in terms of population, but fundamentally different buying behaviors in terms of how merchants and consumers wish to engage online. ACI, US organization, the US culture is embedded in our DNA. And then when we talk to them that in some markets that you can actually buy and receive goods without even paying for them, pay by invoice, they just, no, that can't be true. You've got to be crazy. That is not an accepted payment method. So we at ACI still have to educate our team and our stakeholders that offering the local payment method is absolutely the recipe for success. So I'm confident that you all recognize this landscape, a fragmented landscape of different solution providers, and which gives different levels of prioritization. There's manual order review and its conversion challenges. And how does a merchant decide which is the most relevant and which is the most option to prioritize? It's fundamentally very difficult. There's multiple SLAs, there's multiple cost structures. And what this does is act as a lever for change. It gives motivation for change. It gives motivation to look and consider your status quo. And fundamentally, from our experience at ACI, most of these merchants are dealing with legacy IT systems and providers. And why is that important? It's important because it limits scale and it limits opportunity. And that really only compounds the challenge that is presented to merchants who are looking to grow their business globally. Now, I'm not ignorant of the fact that there are very compelling solution providers that offer a full service model, that classic one-stop shop. And in most cases, and in some cases, that can be very effective for merchants. So I'm not ignorant of that, but what we wanted to do is fundamentally offer an alternative perspective on how merchants can confront and build and work within the challenge of global payment acceptance. And our view at ACI is that there's very compelling evidence to dismantle the current infrastructure and ecosystem. And it's really, the ever-changing landscape requires for faster adoption of new payment methods and new technologies. And it wasn't several years ago that machine learning was somewhat nascent and it was somewhat on the edge of fraud management. But now it's really demanded much more of a mainstream appeal for merchants, a mid-tier, corporate, and the absolute global market moving merchants. So our interpretation is a different approach, and we describe this as a global payments layer. It's a vision of vendor agnosticity. So, irrespective of where you want the transaction to be routed, there should be no bias in that transaction journey, whether it needs to go to acquirer A, B, C, D, or anywhere in between. And remember, ACI as a technology company, we're not an acquirer, we're not a PSP, we're not an FI. We have no bias on where that transaction goes. So that's why we believe this view of a global payments layer, which has the level of, it's vendor agnostic, has great appeal to global retailers and merchants. And what this does, it enables, irrespective of whether it's acquirer, if it's a risk platform, if it's 3DS, MPIs, or it's sort of manual order review or reconciliation, take it to the best-in-breed partner. And if you have that common platform and that common view, that gives you almost unlimited choice. An unlimited choice gives you unlimited flexibility, and that means you're most agile and able to adapt to the needs of your consumer. Now, remember that digitally savvy consumer that is demanding frictionless payments, immediacy, because we're living in a world of here now. We are working in real time, ladies and gentlemen. So we're advocating a disassembly of the current infrastructure. Now, I understand that this level of transformation and it requires a mind shift. It requires a different level of thinking. I mean, conceptually, a global payments layer, it requires a cultural shift because you've got to not only think locally, but you've got to think globally, but you need to act locally. So I wanted to share with you a very quick retailer case study that we went on, and it was so bold and innovative, it stretched the thinking at ACI. It really put us in a way that we needed to be more agile, more reactive, and fundamentally we went on a co-creation journey with this particular customer. And what they wanted to achieve was a level of market expansion. And as a global player, they wanted to move into new markets. They wanted to ensure that they wasn't losing ground on their competitor. And fundamentally, they had 3 KPIs, revenue and profit, of course, but one of those key KPIs was customer satisfaction. So they put the customer at the forefront of every part of their thinking and every part of their strategy. And that in turn stretched ACI in terms of how we were thinking. Now, what does the customer want online? What does the customer want in store? What does the customer require in terms of click and collect and in-store returns? What do I do when I'm shopping overseas? What am I doing if I'm shopping in a new region where credit might not be available because there's unbanked? So this project put the consumer very much in the forefront of everything they've done. And what we was able to do was sort of provide them with a level of vendor that they could go to ensure that they optimize their conversion, and fundamentally they was able to achieve some key metrics in terms of international growth. And one principal area that this merchant was looking to achieve was to consolidate some major global acquirers. And this was one of the challenges they put in front of ACI. Now, ACI can connect to, let's call it over 100 global acquirers. And remember, there's no bias in our routing. Where does this transaction need to go to optimize acceptance, to optimize payment acceptance, but also reduce payment cost? And there are some very clear wins in large markets like US and Russia, where you can find massive upside if you're partnering with the right provider. But by partnering with the right provider, there has to be choice and flexibility. And remember that ultimately the merchant needs choice. So there needs to be a structure where there has choice and also a mechanism that choice can be increased. So we at ACI provide almost a metaphorical conveyor belt of payment connectivity to APMs and acquirers. Again, with that no bias mentality. And this notion of an agnostic global payments layer continues into risk management. I mean, they wanted one service provider that could absorb all their data. And they were critically dependent on the capacity and the resilience of that service provider that could manage their hype sales. Hype sales, let's call that Black Friday or Cyber Monday, but every other month. They needed the resilience to manage those peak hype sales. So they wanted a platform that could specialize in global connectivity, but also had the global resilience to cope with those types of sales. And again, it was about, well, where's the best in market? If we can provide this common platform of payment acceptance and connectivity, they would be able to achieve their goals. So fundamentally, what we have come to the conclusion is that there's several key takeaways. And digital transformation is a massive undertaking, especially for larger, more established companies. As I said, it's a cultural change. It demands a shift in mindset. And we are increasingly more confident at ACI that, predicated on these four takeaways, that there is a real alternative approach to the challenges of global acceptance. And what merchants need to do is identify, are there legacy systems limiting their capacity for growth? Are there legacy systems limiting their capacity to engage and move into new markets? And customers, that's you, that's us, that's him, that's her. I mean, we have real increased expectations about our shopping experience. So it's always about providing the most engaging payment experience when by the time you've selected your good, you want to just get it and receive it as quickly as possible. So merchants are always seeking new and more innovative ways to accept and streamline payments. And our view is that there is an alternative in the marketplace where we provide this agnostic payments layer to propel and accelerate global online payment.
Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. Thank you.